Hello everybody and welcome to this meeting of the Cabinet of Oxford City Council on, where are we, Wednesday the 11th of September here in Oxford Town Hall. I have no apologies for absence received, although I note that Caroline Green, Chief Executive Officer, is not able to be here today, so apologies from her. Are there any declarations of interest? Nope, none. There are no received addresses and questions by members of the public, council addresses on either items on the Cabinet agenda or neighbourhood issues, and no items raised by Cabinet members. So that takes us on to scrutiny reports and Councillor Miles. So over to you, Catherine.
Thank you, Susan. So I just want to summarise, first of all, that we met on the 3rd of September and considered a number of items, the Oxfordshire Inclusive Economy Partnership Charter and the annual update on pledges that we've made as a council. We also looked at the annual safeguarding report for 23-24 and had a presentation on antisocial behaviour. And this is how the council manages the ASB and the sort of the structure of the team. This was really a precursor to the planned update to the ASB policy, which I know is coming down the line. In addition, the committee agreed the budget review group scope, which it will take place in December until the budget's approved by council. And we didn't, by way of background, didn't make any recommendations on the annual safeguarding report, but we did come up with 3 recommendations, which are presented to Cabinet today across 2 of the other topics that we discussed, and they're seeking a response. So in addition to the scrutiny committee, there was a finance and performance panel on the 4th of September, and they discussed 3 Cabinet items: the council strategy, key performance indicators, the integrated performance report for Q1 of this financial year, and the Treasury Management Annual Report. It didn't make any recommendations in respect to the key performance indicator report, but there were 2 recommendations which are presented today to Cabinet across the other 2 reports, and we're looking for a response for those. And then the final panel that has met since was on the 10th of September, so only yesterday, and that report back will go to a future Cabinet meeting because it was too close to today's Cabinet. So just turning to the first report and recommendation around antisocial behaviour, I'd like to thank Councillor Arshad and all the officers for attending for this item. We discussed a number of issues around, and this was in response to the very useful background presentation on how this issue is managed at the council. So we discussed fly tipping by HMO landlords and students, enforcement and partnership working around some of these related issues, littering and noise nuisance, and then some of the issues related to governance, transparency and reporting, and resourcing this wider function. We came up with 1 recommendation, which you see before you, and that was around this need for adequate resourcing for some of the increasingly complex antisocial behaviour cases that are coming to the team, which do have budgetary and resource implications. And so looking at that to in the context of future budget setting to see whether or not we can see what is needed in terms of enhancing the budget in that area to deal with these cases. Just to add, we recognise that there may be other topics to discuss around antisocial behaviour, but they will go forward to the policy discussions, which I know that you're working to update. So I'll pause here for a Cabinet member response on the antisocial behaviour recommendation, please.
Thanks very much, Catherine. Ubna, over to you.
I agree with what Catherine said, and thank you very much for that. Response is really with the team as to what you want to do next. So I think the 3 that you highlighted, one was the antisocial behaviour in the parks.
May I help, Lubna? The recommendation to Cabinet was that in the context of budget setting in future years, we conduct a review of the future capacity challenges and resource implications of complex antisocial behaviour cases, which the Community Safety Service manages or is involved in with partners. And the reported response is that we agree that we need to better understand and assess these cases. So I mean, I think it was basically in agreement with the recommendation. So I think and hope that scrutiny would be happy with your response to that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Lubna. Yes, I mean, this is really coming from the officers, and we hadn't anticipated actually to make any recommendation, but it was very clear that that was a need that was coming through. So thank you for supporting that. Moving now to the Oxfordshire Inclusive Economy Partnership pledges and annual update. Again, thank you, Councillor Brown and Councillor Chapman and all the officers for attending on this. We were really heartened to see the progress that the council has made, and we discussed and touched on data to evidence, progressing additional pledges, and the need potentially for disaggregated data to see the level of inclusion that has been achieved on a couple of key items. So with that, we were looking at issues around procurement and the types of enterprises that we're procuring from, and then also looking at disaggregated data around apprenticeships, for instance. And so with that, we made these two recommendations. One, which is ensuring that the council pledges are aligned to many of the organisational practices that we have, which actually meet many more pledges than we are saying that we're currently meeting. And then that in the future, some of the update reports include some quantitative data that is disaggregated on some of these key points. So we know a little bit more about the demographic characteristics of the individuals that data is being reported on. So because that can help understand sort of a bit more around the level of inclusion of different groups. So any feedback on that recommendation, and also if you have any clarification questions, happy to take them. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. I'll deal with this and then hand over to Nigel or anyone else who wants to input into this. But on the first one, which was essentially saying, could we report back on some of the pledges that we hadn't necessarily signed up to, but actually were probably meeting anyway? And I think the response that we gave both at committee and I would say now in the formal response is that we will do that if we are able to do that without creating too much extra work. The reason for having a focus on specific pledges was, one, to actually try and move things forward. So not just actually sign up to the ones we knew we were already doing, but actually sign up to ones where we thought there was still work to be done. And that isn't to say that we aren't already meeting some of the pledges that are there. But yeah, the important thing here is not to be creating lots of extra work for officers, which then takes them away from doing other things which might be important. So that was the first one. And the second one, about quantitative data, I mean, in a sense, it's the same response. It's yes, absolutely, as much as we are able to do that, and that some of this would, in any case, I think, be part of the performance report, and we're happy to do that wherever it's possible to do that without creating too much extra work. So I think that's the gist of the response.
Thank you.
Nigel, did you want to add anything?
Not really. I concur exactly what you've said. And the people team in particular, because I had a meeting with some of them this morning, is under quite a lot of pressure, to be honest, at the moment, around, you know, a whole load of stuff they've got to do, and processing a lot of, you know, applications and recruitment, because there's a reasonably high turnover at the moment, and so on and so forth. A lot of new systems coming into place next year as well. So I think we just need to be careful we don't create an industry around this. And therefore, where it's possible to do it, you know, easily, we'll do it, but we can't really do a whole sort of slate of new pieces of quantitative data when we don't actually have them. So I'm endorsing exactly what you're saying, Susan. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. Anyone else wanted to? No? Okay. Fine. It's back to you, Catherine. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. And I totally appreciate, yeah, we don't want to create reporting for the sake of reporting. I think on some of these items, as you say, the data actually is already there, or the insights, the high level insights, even if it's the based on quantitative data is there that can be drawn on as long as it's not extra work. So appreciate, the work on that if and when it's possible to communicate some of those insights going forward. On the finance and performance report summaries, I'll take both together. These were Councillor Fry, as you know, chairs this group. I'd like to first of all on Treasury Management Annual Report thank Councillor Turner and officers for attending on this item, and they discussed a number of items around benchmarking against other authorities, management accounting in the interest in relation to council loans to council-owned companies, and also external debt as a topic area. They made one recommendation related to benchmarking the council's treasury management function against other local authorities over time. Would you like to take a response to that now, or shall I move on actually to the next? You can move on. Shall I? Yeah.
I'm happy to do them both together. Let's do them both together.
Okay. So then again, Councillor Turner and officers attended for the next item on the integrated performance report. And again, once again, thanks for that. They touched on the topic of temporary accommodation, demand and mitigations. This is, I think, a big issue for the council at the moment. Overspend on responsive and cyclical repairs and housing benefit subsidy. And again, there was one recommendation for this, and this was related to the adverse variance related to the issue of housing benefit subsidy claims and analysis of options available to address this. So both those recommendations are before you in more formal language, and seek your response on both. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent.
Yeah, the benchmarking piece is fine. I mean, in a sense that happens to a degree anyway, but probably without visibility through our advisors. But yeah, fine. And we've agreed to provide a report for next panel meeting, and that'll be good. And thanks in advance to officers for working that through. And on the HB matter, absolutely, we were on this anyway. It is terrifically concerning that we face a very substantial extra cost because of the structure of a provider who we don't sort of directly commission, if you like, and we're that's not ideal. So we are going to brief the panel, of course. We'll be glad to do that. And in our note, we'll look at the mitigations that we are looking at and discuss those. But I do just want to caution, this is not something which can be in our gift alone because of the nature of the piece. So yes to both, Catherine, in a world, and it looks like it's going to be an enjoyable meeting of the panel in December.
I'm sure. Thanks in advance for all the work that goes in for preparation for that. I'll say goodbye and thank you to you now, and have a good rest of your meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Right, okay, that takes us on to item 8, which is replacement of front doors to flats with compliant certificated fire doors. And that is over to Linda. And I think we're joined by James and Neris online. So Linda, over to you.
Thank you. You'll see in the report, there's a whole page of A4 there about which lists the different legislation governing fire doors in residential buildings. And the problem we have is we can't evidence that all the fire doors that we've got in our buildings at the moment actually meet all of those requirements. So we've got a programme to replace all the fire doors with new doors where we have that certification and confidence that they do meet all the current latest requirements. We've completed the programme on the most high risk blocks, the tower blocks. That's a 2-year programme which has been completed by ODS. We're now moving on to the next stage, which is temporary accommodation blocks, housing for older people, and Pound House. So we've got provision in the budget for this work already, £3.5 million. So this report is about allowing us to get on and spend that and complete this work. I'll hand over to the officers to add anything else which you need to know.
Thank you, Linda. James Neris, anything you'd like to add?
Thank you, Councillor. I think that's about it. It's about the awarding of the contract and letting us get on with the installations, please.
Yep, sounds like a good move. So, has anyone got any questions or comments? I think the only comment that comes out regularly whenever we talk about fire doors is making sure that elderly and disabled tenants are able to still get out, because the difficulty with fire doors is that they can be extremely heavy. So just wanting to flag that we assume and hope that as part of these measures, we will be making sure that people are actually able, where they need to have buttons they can press to automatically open the door and things like that. So I'm assuming that is part of the work that you're doing there. Particularly around Atkins Court, which I declare an interest is in my ward, but is one of the sheltered pieces, sheltered accommodation that is in the list.
Except that the doors are heavy, Councillor, and where we can make the facilitation, it would be to install access, powered access, and might be site dependent or installation dependent, in which case we'll have to look at mitigations like closure controls. So it's a technical solution, but I'm sure we can accommodate most of that.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody got any other issues? No? Okay, in which case can we move to recommendations, which are to grant project approval and delegate authority to agree the actual contract. So everyone happy to agree that? That is unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, James and Neris. Neris, don't go away, because we're going to have you for the next report as well. Linda, back over to you again on asbestos surveying and air monitoring contract. And we're also joined by Mark online for this one as well. So thank you.
So like the last report, this is another report about doing the work we need to do to keep all our buildings safe. In this case, both for our tenants and for everyone else working and visiting our other buildings as well. So this is about awarding a contract for the asbestos surveying and air monitoring when it's required, when there's something that needs investigating in both HRA and general fund buildings, 80% HRA, 20% general fund. The proposed contract is for 3 years, plus an option for a further 2-year extension periods. A further two extension periods of 1 year each. And we're expecting the cost to be approximately £500,000, which is already in the budget. So I propose we agree this report and get on with awarding the contract.
Thanks very much, Linda. Mark, Neris, did you want to add anything?
No, nothing from me, Councillor. It's exactly what it says, really.
Does what it says on the tin. Thank you. Anybody got any questions? Joe.
I was just wondering how the expense is going to be monitored, because it is budgeted over different budget lines, not in one single budget line like the previous one. So how is it going to be monitored? Thank you.
Who would like to answer that one? Neris, I think that's probably one for you.
Yeah, we will need to just set the appropriate arrangements according to the contract, really, and just ensure that we can split it up appropriately, Chewy, so that we can just do that. That we need to make some adjustments to what the current arrangements are. So, but we will do that as part of the kind of procurement and the kind of contract monitoring.
Thanks, Neris. Right. Unless anyone's got any other questions or comments, I suggest we move to the recommendations, which are to, again, grant project approval and delegate authority to enter into the contracts required. So all those in favour? Again, a unanimous decision. So thank you very much. And thank you very much, Mark and Neris. We are now on to item 10, which is the sale of land, additional land at Redbridge and Hinksey to the Environment Agency. And this is report from Ed, and we have as well Emma for online for us on this one. So over to you, Ed.
Yeah, thank you. So the Oxford Flood Alleviation Scheme, with which Cabinet colleagues will be very familiar, is of course an essential measure to protect householders across our city and beyond from flooding. And one of the things, of course, which the Environment Agency will need to do if as and when that goes ahead is around biodiversity net gain delivery. And the proposal here is to make available, under terms which are set out in a confidential appendix, an option to the Environment Agency for some additional land, which we believe is very suitable, and they believe is suitable. That's why we want to do a deal for the biodiversity net gain. And we believe that land would indeed be beneficial for that purpose. It would be good, of course, to support the delivery of the flood alleviation scheme in that way. And the further terms are set out in a confidential appendix in terms of other impacts of a positive nature on Oxford City Council. I'm not expecting to go into confidential session on this, but if people want to, obviously they can. And if discussion goes into that way, I'm sure you'll move the relevant paragraphs. Otherwise, I would like to move the recommendation.
Thanks very much, Ed. Emma, did you want to add anything?
No, nothing further to add from me, thanks.
Thanks very much. Questions, Alex? Is this on the open agenda?
It relates to the confidential agenda, but it's not a if I word the question correctly, it will not relate to a confidential element of it, if that's all right, because it's about a principle rather than anything specific. Shall I try and see what happens?
Let's give it a whirl and we'll see where we get to.
Yeah, okay.
Linda's poised.
Yeah, we're all poised, ready. Okay, somebody ready to press the buttons and turn me off. The confidential appendix refers to some occasional financial liabilities which are incurred on this land, which currently fall to the council and would not under this transfer. I just wanted to try and identify which bit of the council those costs identified in the confidential appendix currently fall on, and therefore will be seeing the benefit of having them not fall on them. Is that confidential?
No, I think I can answer that one. So it will be the council's repairs and maintenance budget that usually picks that up. So it will see a decrease in cost there.
The general fund repairs and maintenance.
General fund repairs and maintenance.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Emma. Linda.
Yeah, again, I don't think this is confidential, but the site at the moment, there is an unauthorised encampment there, which has been there for a while. It's members of the Irish travelling community that have set up home there. I think while it's, that is absolutely not the right place for any encampment, and it is unauthorised, and this is an appropriate use of this land, and what is happening there isn't an appropriate use of that land. I do think it's important as a cabinet that we note the pressure that there is for space, for sites from that community, and the fact that Redbridge Hollow has expanded in an unauthorised fashion onto this land, and that there is pressure, and that we perhaps put down a marker about our willingness to work with district council partners on finding new sites for members of that community to call home.
Thanks, Linda. That's also seemed to me to be fine. So hopefully Emma's not looking sort of crossly at me. So I'm assuming I'm okay. Neither Emma is looking crossly at me, so that's good. So has anyone got any further questions or comments on this report? No, in which case can we move to the recommendation, which is to delegate authority to the relevant people named in the report to agree the final terms and enter into the options agreement, transfer, etc. Is everyone happy to agree that? Yes. Thank you very much. It's good news. Thank you. So we are now therefore onto the council strategy 24. Oh yes, sorry. Thank you, Emma. She's gone already. We're on to item 11, which is the council strategy 24 to 28 key performance indicators, which is my report, along with Claire, who's online, and Mish, who's with us in the room. So I'm going to do a very quick introduction and then hand over to Mish and Claire, who've done the work on this, to actually talk us through it. But all I'm going to say really is that we spent quite a long time trying to refine our key performance indicators in line with both recommendations of previous scrutiny committees, but also the peer review that we had not long ago, and indeed our own wishes as a cabinet to try and get performance indicators that were specific to the council, so actually things that we could control, not things that were out of our control, even if we might like to see improvements in whatever it was, and also to make sure that there weren't lots and lots of them. So that is where we have got to. This report is where we have got to on all of those. There's been quite a lot of discussion through various different bodies over time, including scrutiny and the finance panel, and I've talked to the other group leaders about this. You know, there's been a lot of discussion, basically, a lot of toing and froing, and this is where we have ended up. I hope people are happy with it, but I will hand over to Claire and Mish to talk a little bit more about the detail.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's worth noting that scrutiny in the end chose not to make any recommendations. There's the finance panel that discussed it, and whilst there was a point made by Councillor Smoten about the benefit of being able to measure some of the broader outcomes that we're seeking to achieve, and he gave a couple of examples, such as the actual affordability ratio in the city for housing. So which is straightforwardly the number of years' salary that the average person would need to earn to be able to pay for a property, and also the size of the housing waiting list was another example. And although in the end these KPIs don't do that, what they do is focus on things that the council itself has more agency directly to impact. I think it's worth noting that, of course, both of those wider measures are already reported and available, and there will be a large suite of other such measures, both at the kind of very strategic level, as reported by government, by county council, and indeed elsewhere, as well as more granular measures that we will be collecting, which are our operational KPIs, and we are in the midst of a piece of work which is updating those operational KPIs from the sort of circa just over 100 that we currently have. So that goes sort of hand in hand with this. I think Claire's can just very briefly sort of outline the kind of the approach that's been taken under each of these broad themes.
Thanks, Mish. Over to you, Claire.
Thank you. So sorry, I'm just now switching my screens around to get the right document in front of me. So we have, going through these, we've tried to pick out the key themes that relate to the corporate strategy. And so I'm really sorry, I've now clicked the wrong screen, but if I quickly run through
just while you're finding it, Claire, let me make the comment I was thinking of potentially making after Mish was speaking anyway. So while you go and find the document, so I I was just going to say that in response to this discussion that we had at scrutiny and comments that Ian just made, Mish, that there is a difference between things that we can measure and may then wish to include in our reports, and things that we measure ourselves on. And I think that's the crucial point in terms of trying to find the right KPIs. And I hope and think that we have got those things that should give us a sense of where we are performing in relation to our overall aims and objectives, part of our corporate strategy, but things that we actually have direct influence over. So that is where we've ended up. Claire, have I given you enough time yet?
Thank you very much. Yes. So in terms of our thinking on these, on the housing strand, we have looked at what our key issues are, and these also reflect what we've heard back when we consulted on the strategy. So the number of new affordable homes, and we have put in annual targets, which are, of course, the construction sector is difficult to predict at 4 years out exactly how we're going to be landing, but there's confidence that over the piece we can arrive at the total. Rough sleeping is again a priority. We've looked at how we can measure those in something meaningful, and this has been worked through with the housing team. That is probably one of the most sort of meaningful ways that we could come up with something on that, having tested alternative routes. And so rather than running through each of these, if I say what we have done is we've taken what the overall objectives are within the corporate strategy and tried to find measures that we have that are meaningful to those and that are possible for us to measure within the systems and the data collection that we have. Some of them we have looked at trying to improve on, and we're not able to at the moment. So you may sort of wonder, for example, we've looked at whether we can be more precise about how much spend goes to local businesses in the Oxfordshire area. But this is, in terms of how our tracking systems are set up, we're confident that we can track this, and we may be able to go into more detail in other reports. In the Thriving Communities piece, we've tried to focus very much on that reflection of health, and we've picked up on both adults and youth as key different demographics, and that's reflected in those. We have within the zero carbon area shifted to so we're looking then at government data, and this is broad enough that it's not dictating specific measures, but it's dictating outcomes. I think in terms of the sort of overall approach, the thing that I would say is that we've tried to keep this very top level, and so that it's a limited number under each of these KPIs. We looked at whether more KPIs were meaningful, and in fact we then very quickly got into areas that services were going to be reporting on in any case, so we didn't want to duplicate the work. And so I think these are sort of, in terms of the strategic piece, these are sort of well tested and carefully selected top level view that will help us on an annual basis to be able to review whether we are on track to achieve the outcomes that we've said in the corporate strategy, rather than whether we are delivering specific programs. And that's the intention behind them.
Thank you very much, Claire. Now, has anyone got any questions? Because I'm conscious that this is it. So once we have decided this today, we have set our KPIs for the next 4 years, which is what we'll be measured on. So I see Alex and Nigel.
Yeah, I had just a question on, it hasn't got a number, but the second zero carbon Oxford measure, which is the citywide one, not the city council one. The benchmark is 610 kilotons, I'm assuming KT is, and our target for 24-25 is 453, and our target for 25-26 is 411. That's quite a significant drop in the first year, which we're already well into. How confident are we that the benchmark and that first year target are correct / achievable? I'm just wondering why it's dropping by 25% in year one, and why presumably we're really confident about that, or whether there is a typographic error perhaps in the benchmark.
Mish, I think that's probably one for you.
Yes. Now, I believe that this may be linked to the fact that this is there is a 2-year time lag associated with the actual measures that we get on carbon. So this year, the data, and the government publishes this data, it's produced sort of around mid-year each year, is not data from 2024 or even 2023, it's 2022 data, so there's a 2-year time lag associated with it. I think that what we're looking at here is the difference between so this essentially, I believe, 2 years worth of time lag in here, and that we will only know the 2024 to 25 outcome in 26-27.
So it's not 12 months between the first figure and the second figure, it's 36 months.
But I have got smart people in my team who have sort of pulled the numbers together here, who I will get to put a note.
Okay, that does sound quite complicated though in terms of how we then get measured on the performance indicators. So I think let's take that one away to actually have a look at and make sure that we are really clear about what it is we are reporting on and being measured on at any given year. And if we're saying target for 24-25, is that the actual air quality or carbon emissions, sorry, for 24-25, or is it the figures that we get in 24-25? Because there clearly is a difference. Yeah, and I'm not sure that we're clearer on that at this stage. Okay, thank you. Good question. I saw Nigel next, then you, Linda. Yeah.
I don't actually have a question, more comment. Actually, I think this is a well-judged piece of work. And actually, we've had debates in the past about what we can control and what we can't control, and we seem to have really done a good job about pitching this right. And also a sense of realism, you know, at a time when our funds are very tight and going to get tighter, in some of those areas you could have set yourself a bigger target, but actually it wouldn't have been wise because we wouldn't be able to do it. So I think it's a really good piece of work, and it's good to see the well-run council, which I don't think actually had public indicators in the past, is now part of the mix, because we need to report back on efficiency and, you know, channel shifts to digital and so on and so forth, which are part of our strategy. So I'm very pleased to see that. So I think it's really good.
Thank you, Nigel. Linda.
On satisfaction with parks and open spaces, just wondering about what the rationale is for a static target all the way through at 85%. Is it because that is already very high and, you know, it's not realistic to look for an improvement? I'm just contrasting it with the target about satisfaction from the public when it comes to a well-run council, and tenant satisfaction in terms of landlord services, where we, even though, you know, we're in a good place already, we are looking for, you know, for constant improvement, however sort of realistic we are being about the capacity for that. So yeah, thank you.
I mean, I was toying with the idea of whether or not to actually mention specifically this one, because I think it's probably, in some ways, it's been the most controversial indicator on the whole list for a number of different reasons, including the fact that it's sort of, it was difficult finding that third indicator, I think, for in this particular area, and we've had quite a lot of to and fro as to whether this was the right indicator And I think it is because it's measurable. It's about public satisfaction, which I think is important. And it's about the kind of wider environment, which is also about people enjoying the green spaces in our city. But in direct answer to your question, yes, it's because it's very high already. And in a period where, as you know, Nigel was already saying, we are looking at falling budgets, not increasing budgets. The chances are that we will struggle to keep it at that level. And, I think it is going to be a challenge to try and make sure that, we keep, our maintenance of parks and what we're offering in our parks up to a level that we keep those satisfaction levels up. So actually, I think it's quite a challenging target, even though it doesn't move. So that would be my response to that. I don't know if Nish wants to add anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was the highest individual satisfaction score that we received as a council through the residents panel survey last year. No other score is as high as this one.
Joe.
Yeah, I just want to comment that as a cabinet member, very happy with the satisfaction, and our team works very hard. My comment actually is on the amount of council money we spent on the local smaller businesses. I mean, that's quite good. I'm happy to see this in a report, as you have said, Susan, that it's quite difficult to select things that we can be measured on. But I remember me some time back sitting and contributing on the procurement strategy. So to see this and 70% of the council money spent on the local smaller businesses, it's something that is good, and so we should note that. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Okay. Well, I'm not hearing any dissent around any of the performance indicators. So unless anyone's got any further questions or comments, looking around the room, no. I think we can probably move therefore to the recommendations, which are to agree them, note the benchmarking and annual targets, and delegate authority to make any further minor amendments, and noting specifically at this point the point that we're going to take away around the carbon emissions. Have I got the right one? I think it was carbon emissions, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. So we will take a close look at that and just make sure we are absolutely 100% clear about exactly what it is that we are measuring and reporting on. So with those provisos, everyone happy to agree the recommendations? Thank you very much. We are now moving on to the integrated, thanks Claire, online. So we are now moving on to the integrated performance report, over to Ed, and we have Bill in the room as well for this one. So Ed,
yeah, thanks. A bit unusual actually. I'll start with that. Bill, thanks for joining us tonight. We're often joined by Nigel Kennedy, who's taking a well-earned day's leave today ahead of finance, but Bill, in his role as the financial accounting manager, does a huge amount to support Nigel. And very often when we talk about the budget, when we talk about treasury management, when we talk about the huge volumes of money, when we talk about the capital programme and its financing, and we talk about the minimum revenue provision, and we talk about nasty things that government wants to do with us, we quite rightly celebrate Nigel as a hero. We sing Nigel, but Bill's a bit of an unsung hero in this sort of space. So, Bill, it's good to have you with us tonight. I just didn't want to miss out on the opportunity actually just to mention that. It's really, really appreciated all the support you've given us.
You're going to be able to get out the door this evening.
Well, yeah, we'll see how this discussion goes. So we might not back both these reports, and you'll be anyway. I digress. So this one's the integrated performance report. Let's start off with, the headlines on the budget side of things. Unfortunately, general fund revenue, which is where our eyes ain't properly go. First of all, we're looking at an adverse variance, and the big driver of that is around temporary accommodation. As I said to Scrutiny when we were talking about this report, we knew at the time of budget setting this was likely to be the case. But rather than ripping up our budget, running around for the next round of savings, we thought we needed to take stock. And I think when we set our budget this year, we're going to have to look quite carefully at the impact around TA costs, both for this year and in future years, and make sure that we're realistic. I know officers are working extra hard to try to mitigate the TA situation. It was interesting. Actually, it wasn't just interesting. It was really good to see that the government published today the proposals around ending no-fault evictions. So much of the temporary accommodation comes from people being evicted through no fault of their own and then turning to the council for help. And, that is the sort of thing which a number of us campaign to see a change of government. And, we hope to see that come through. But I think that is one of the things which will take time. We are also asking, to meet with ministers. Clearly Rome wasn't built in a day, and this sort of thing won't get fixed in a day. And in the meantime, there's a hefty budget challenge. There are the other issues flagged in the report. Some of those are sort of more one-off in nature. And others have been reported previously. So, for example, we've been through the issue around insurance valuations previously. We've got a one-off variation on business improvement, which we've talked about that, Councillor Chapman and I think a good chunk of that is one-off. We've got some variation on the capital programme as well, and the slippages are beneficial on the general fund side, but on the general fund revenue side, we're making some progress in terms of our capital programme forecasting. We're also, in any case, if you like, the Bill's bit of the business, making sure we got the readies available to fund our capital programme. I think doing okay in terms of anticipating slippage, but still that's an area where we can do better yet. On the HRA side, again, that's reported here. There are some areas where there's overspend, unfortunately, and we'll need to keep tabs of those. We were talking actually, Susan, this morning about the changing parameters on the HRA. We're expecting a big announcement from government, and I think what we'll need to do as an authority that owns its own stock is do some quite big picture work, looking at the competing priorities on the HRA. Alongside that, we clearly need to make sure that we work hard to see that things which cost money, particularly purchased from ODS or elsewhere, are giving appropriate value, and that's very much underway as well. So that's the integrated report. I've kept it high level, happy to drill down into the details if you'd like.
Thanks very much, Ed. Bill, did you want to add anything at this stage?
I think the only thing that I'd add is that what Ed was saying about the capital programme and slippage, that has a linkage through to the revenue position on the interest income and the borrowing costs, which also has a linkage through into the Treasury annual report. So yeah, there's sort of correlation between those.
Thank you, and obviously we're coming on to that next. So yes, well flagged up. I was just going to say, if I may, on the temporary accommodation issue, that this is a very huge issue, not just for us, but for councils up and down the country. But it is a very big issue for us, and it's one that we've been doing a lot of lobbying on at all levels, both within the local government association, district councils network, but also obviously with successive governments, and I'm pleased to say it's certainly getting a better reception with the current government than we had with the previous governments. So let's put it that way. And indeed, one of the things obviously that we have lobbied on for some time, as has local government more generally, is the ending of Section 21 evictions, which is really good to see action being taken on that. There are obviously still other issues which some of which are kind of fleshed out in this report, not least the issue of the fact that we don't get housing benefit subsidy when people are being accommodated in non-registered housing provider accommodation. And that has become a particularly significant issue for us here in Oxford. And I think there is some new lobbying potentially that we can do around that. So we will be. But you know, we have got a very difficult situation, and as I said, we're not alone in it. Doesn't make it any easier to manage. Are there any questions and comments, Alex?
Yeah, just a couple of comments building on what you just said. I think while I'm delighted to hear that the Section 21 eviction changes are at last going to happen. I mean, they've been promised for years, and it's good to see them brought forward. It is worth reminding government that in places of high short-term accommodation demand, like Oxford, one very likely consequence is that people who are landlords who are currently in the private rented sector will shift to the short-term let sector, because they will see that as something which is easier for them to control tenancies. And the consequence, therefore, could be a further reduction in the supply of private rented accommodation, which in places like Oxford and others will be calamitous. So it's important, I think, that our ongoing and regular lobbying efforts to government remind government that the two things need to go hand in hand. If you do one without the other, there is potential for really serious negative consequences. So that was thing number one. Thing number two was more of a question for Ed or for Bill or for whoever on this issue of the non-registered provider organisations and the housing benefit. I mean, £800,000 is a very significant sum of money. That's now, you know, that's in excess of many of our nice to have budgets, which we're looking at having to reduce very significantly or get rid of entirely. I assume that given the pressures that Oxfordshire County Council is under, it's not that they're being difficult, perverse or peculiar. They're doing what they need to do. The issue is the regulations, and it's therefore the housing benefit regulations which are the thing to change. Or is it that the County Council are housing people in such a peculiar way that it's costing us a fortune?
Ed, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I'll have a go. I'm not sure. I think it may be officers who aren't currently in the room. So what I said, scrutiny flagged this as well, Alex, sorry, at the start, and it was probably not clear. That's what I was talking about. And just to make it a little bit worse, this is £800,000 adverse variance on something we already expected to be bad. And the full figure is a grotty seven-figure figure.
It's a 1.4 million.
There we go. That's grotty. I mean, and the issue is they can commission it, and as I understand it, it's because there aren't. It's not the county council being difficult or blasé. It's around the range of providers and who is an RP or not, who's actually able to provide the service, as I understand it. And in the past, we've looked at things like trying to encourage the existing provider to become an RP, but that hasn't happened. But I think, yeah, as I say, this is well and truly on our radar. It's certainly something which I raised with Caroline Green, our chief executive, and suggested really needed to be pursued at the highest level with the county council, because the costs involved are very special. And you know, I think Alex as well, the hint in there is there might, you know, is there something as well? If it just can't be changed, but it is ridiculous, should we try lobbying government? I mean, yeah, we possibly should, but wonderful as to new government is, you know, whether DWP regulations shift in a way which costs the government 1.4 million to our benefit very quickly because we write a letter. I mean, even there I'd have my doubts. So, yeah, to be continued. And interested people can look at the note we provide to scrutiny in December, and can also provide some challenge in the budget process or at any other time.
Thanks, Ed.
I was just going to add that, yeah, although the largest proportion is the county, then there also can be nominations by the ICB and also other councils. So it's kind of a wider issue than just the county, although the county is the biggest problem for Oxford.
Yeah, thank you. That's right. So other authorities may well place people in similarly unregistered housing providers in Oxford, and then we'd be liable for their housing benefit over and above. Yeah, which is potentially going to be a more significant issue in future, I suspect. I'm just going to also say that we haven't lost sight of the first point that Alex made, which was around short-term lets. And it is, again, something that when I am lobbying on that point very strongly, is to say they have to go hand in hand. So we will continue to make sure that we put pressure on the current government to take action on short-term lets as well, because it's long been the lobbying position of this council that we need to have powers to regulate short-term lets in our city. And yeah, that also has an impact, unfortunately, on our temporary accommodation costs and the lack of availability of accommodation in the city. So not forgotten. Okay, are there any other questions or comments on this report? I'm not seeing any, in which case can we note the projected financial outturn as well as the current position as set out in the report? Duly noted. I don't really feel we need to, it always feels odd to put your hand up to note something, so, but I think we have duly noted it. So thank you all very much. We move on to the Treasury Management Annual Report. Again, Ed and Bill, so over to you.
Yeah. Thank you. So this is the backward-looking report that looks at how we performed, and you'll see overall there's a favourable variance, and it's broken down how that was achieved. And as Bill said, that principally sits in the nexus around interest rates, but also capital programme slippage, and otherwise, and a chunk of that as well is also then in turn the relationship with our companies. Of course, just a very obvious point, but slippage by companies might be good news for the Treasury management, but it's not good news in certain other areas, such as the delivery of housing and dividends. But yes, it's a difficult and complicated world. So, that is here for noting. And, I thank the Treasury management team for their work throughout the year. The other bit, there's a confidential appendix on fund matters, which I don't think we necessarily need to discuss now, and we could go into confidential session on. Just to rehearse again a point I made in general terms of scrutiny, we have policies which govern the type of investment that we do. Some of what we do means we keep cash at the ready. Some of what we do ties money up for the longer term and gives a higher level of return. Some of it is absolutely safe as houses, or as good as can be, government bonds. Some of it we would take more of a risk, but also get more of a return. And what we do is we restrict the amount of the riskier stuff that we do. And inevitably, any sort of investment might perform brilliantly. It might carry on giving a brilliant return. Our property funds have tended to give a very good return, actually. And also some, values might appreciate or they might depreciate. And what we then have to do, I think, is challenge ourselves periodically and look back and say, if we'd stuck the money under the mattress or given it to His Majesty's government rather than investing in any sort of fund, would we be better off, or would we have been better off or worse off? And certainly, when I ask officers that question in relation to our funds, the answer comes back all the time. We've done well to take the risk. And yet, some you win, some you don't quite win. But in each case, an ultra risk-averse strategy on Treasury management would be a significant additional cost to the council. What we try and do is balance those things. And the way you balance them is with the Treasury management strategy, which we've already set for this year. But if people think that we need to recalibrate that balance, then they should get stuck into it when we agree it as part of the budget process next year. That's it.
Thanks, Ed. Bill, would you like to add anything?
It's just a couple of bits. Which is that just to point out that the report actually does point out that we're in compliance with the Treasury strategy as set for 23-4. And there are a number of indicators in there that compare back to the strategy. And just again, kind of linking back to another report, really, just to point out that because we're doing internal borrowing for funding capital programme, we'll actually reduce down the level of investment funds that we've got. So at the end of 23-24 financial year, we've only got about 20 million in investment funds, and prior years it's been around 80 million. And that's an actual, that's actually intentional from officers' point of view, because it's actually beneficial financially to the council. But that does link back to the scrutiny report, where they're wanting to compare with other authorities. We're not going to have a lot in the way of investments to actually compare going forwards, and we can compare the backwards looking, but going forwards we're going to be very limited on what we do. It's going to be more about when do we borrow, rather than where do we invest.
Well, that might put us more in line with other authorities, I suspect. We've been in quite a fortunate position, I think, compared to many. So, yeah. Okay, are there any questions or comments on this report? And does anyone need us to move into confidential session? No, certainly not seeing any desire to move into confidential session. No questions or comments, I don't think. So in which case, can we note the report? And thank you very much, Bill, and particularly as I know you've travelled quite a long way to come to our meeting today. So thank you very much indeed. It's very nice to see you. We will then move on to the minutes of the last meeting, which are on page 75 of your agenda. And they are set out for you there. So has anyone got any matters arising or any matters of accuracy they wish to raise? No? Okay. Well, in which case I think we can agree them as an accurate record. And it only therefore falls for me to note that the next meeting is sometime soon. This is on my agenda somewhere. Yes, the